Hello viewers, we welcome you today to this presentation on the topic Globalization and Higher Education in India, Some Implications. You may recall that in the context of development communication, we had earlier explained that in the initial years, the core sectors of development such as agriculture, health and poverty were emphasized. Over a period of time, the scope of development communication has expanded to cover areas such as human rights, gender empowerment, environment, education and others. Today, we shall take up the discussion forward and look at globalization and examine its implication on higher education. This is how the presentation has been designed. We shall start with the context and then move on to the concept and emergence of globalization in India. Then we shall look at some implications of globalization on higher education, and we will look at the new education policy 2020 before wrapping up the discussion. Education, as we all are aware, is at the heart of development and social change. It is one of the foundations for achieving full human potential, developing an equitable society, and promoting national development. Knowledge and skills equip an individual to exercise greater control on one's life and serve as useful resource to society. Education also constitutes as one of the Sustainable Development Goals as DG 4 of the United Nations adopted by India in 2015. It seeks to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all by 2030. For an emerging economy like India, the role of education becomes crucial to meet the challenges as well as the opportunities in the wake of globalization. Now, if we look at the concept of globalization, literally speaking, globalization is the transformation of local or regional phenomena into global ones. It is a process by which people of the world are unified into a global society and function together. However, more often, the term globalization is used to refer to economic globalization, as it relates to integration of national economy with the international economy through trade, foreign direct investment, capital flows and technology. However, the process of globalization is far more complex. It is a combination of various political, economic, technological and socio-cultural forces which have tremendous impact on the cultures across the world. When we look at the evolution of globalization, 19th century is sometimes called the first era of globalization. In this period, there was a rapid growth in international trade and investment between the European imperial powers, their colonies, and later the United States. It was in this period that areas of sub-Saharan Africa and the Pacific Islands were incorporated in the world system. However, the breakout of the First World War in 1914 led to an end of this phase of globalization. After the Second World War, the United States and Soviet Union emerged as the two superpowers, and post-war period led to the Cold War due to their ideological differences. Around this time, globalization was largely the result of planning by economists, business interests and politicians who recognized the cost of protectionism and declining international economic integration. Their efforts led to the founding of several international institutions such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, among others. These were intended to oversee various processes of globalization, promoting growth and managing its consequences. In 1991, the dissolution of the Soviet Union of Russia led to an end of the Cold War and the emergence of America as the sole superpower. When we look at the emergence of globalization in India, we find that 1989 to 91 was a period of great economic instability at the national level. India faced a severe crisis in foreign exchange reserves, which were depleted to abysmally low levels. The balance of payment crisis, BOP as it is called, took place, resulting in huge external debt liabilities. The country was left with reserves of only about $1 million, and there was a strong need to restore India's international credibility by paying these external debt liabilities. And the government took the step to reform the Indian economy to correct the increasing deficit and foreign debt. The World Bank and IMF agreed to bail out the country from the crisis, but on their terms that India accepted their conditions of liberalization or reforms. In response to this demand, the then Prime Minister, late P.V. Narasimha Rao, introduced the new economic policy. In 1991, India embarked upon the path of liberalization, globalization and privatization. The country opened its gate for foreign players and undertook major macroeconomic reforms and structural reforms. The macroeconomic reforms related to controlling the intolerably high inflation, introducing tax reforms, generating resources through divestment, removing distortions created by controls, improving competitive edge for Indian goods and services in global markets, and accelerating the rate of economic growth in a sustained manner. The structural reforms were sector specific, and these were also expanded over a period of time. These were pertaining to the industrial policy, trade policy, policy for attracting foreign direct investment, infrastructure development policies, financial sector reforms, and privatization policies. And many of these reforms had direct linkage with the globalization of education in India, as we will see later on. Within 5 years of introduction of the new economic policy, the Indian economy revived and exhibited a steep growth. However, some scholars also argue that the reforms were fast paced from 91 to 93, and later on when the crisis receded, the reforms also slowed down. In the next general elections, Congress party was defeated and the successive governments were coalition governments who had to keep other parties' ideologies in mind before undertaking further reforms. So this is how it happened. And the thrust of all these reforms was to open India's market to international competition and move towards free market economy. As a member state, India also had to sign certain treaties and agreements to give shape to the plans of globalization. All these reforms have had great impact on different aspects of our lives, including economic, social, political, as well as our education system. When we look at the higher education system in India, we know that it plays an extremely important role in promoting the well-being of society. It contributes towards sustainable livelihood and economic development of the country. As India moves towards becoming a knowledge economy, more and more youth are aspiring for higher education. And Indian higher education system, as you may be aware, is the world's third largest system after the US and China. And since independence, sincere efforts have been made by successive governments and various other bodies to bring larger section of the population in the fold of education. If we look at this table, you will see that how the education system of India has grown over a period of time after the independence. In 1950-51, there was just one IIT in India at Kharagpur, and now we have 23 IITs in 2020. There was no Indian Institute of Management around that time, and now we have 20 IIMs. There was no AIMS, because the first AIM, if I recall, was established in 1956. Now we have 16, and 8 more are under development. Instead of 28 central universities, now we have 53 central universities. In place of 22, we have 412 state universities. There was not a single private university in 50. Now we have 361, if I recall correctly. First private university was established in 1995 only. There was not a single deemed university, which we have 124. Instead of 578 colleges, we have 12,488 colleges, and the enrollments have also, enrollment of students have also increased drastically, as you can see in the table. So this goes on to show that the higher education system in India has expanded greatly over a period of time. We have already said that globalization has ushered in new economic order in which there is a shift towards knowledge society. In this knowledge society, knowledge is considered a universal asset and the driving force of economy instead of men, material and capital. This has resulted in free flow of ideas, information and new technologies and skilled manpower. It has also made it easier for people across the world to connect with each other. Learners and teachers can avail best facilities from any part of the world. Learners can go out, seek admission in well-known institutions. Similarly, faculty from other colleges, well-known colleges, can be invited to India. So this exposure gained from foreign cultures can invigorate the local culture. At the same time, the competition with foreign education providers can lead to a healthy growth of the education sector in India. So there are some issues involved with globalization, and the first of all is privatization, commercialization. Some say that it also leads to commodification of education, it leads to competitiveness, cultural imperialism, and impact on curricula. Let us look at some of these points in some detail. Government has an obligation to provide education to one and all, but it is not possible for the government alone to provide education to the huge emerging population of learners in India. Privatization is an integral part of globalization, as we have seen, and private sector has always been involved in the education sector, especially at the school level. As there is an increase in demand for higher education in different sectors of society, the role of private sector gets indispensable to bridge the gap between the demand and supply. And their involvement not only supplements and complements the government efforts, it also counters the outflow of educational services in the form of brain drain. And many private institutions, they have good infrastructure, better facilities, they have innovative curriculum and strong linkages with industry also. So these are some of the positives of privatization of education. It is argued that it also leads to commercialization of education, as a growing number of private players with varied background and motivations have entered the field of higher education. It has turned higher education sector into a huge market. Some of these institutions charge hefty fee, wherein students do not get the full worth of their money. Some of them have been operating in very small setup without adequate trained faculty. They give inflated figures of their facilities offered and the enrollment, etc. Some of them are also elite centric, and there is a very underrepresentation of the weaker section and marginalized section of society. Girl students, women, all these factors have led to commercialization of higher education also. And in this scenario, students emerge as consumers and educational institutions as mere education providers, which does not lead to healthy growth of education in the country. Let me quote a scholar, Anand, who says, commercialization in the field of education refers to the motive of making money or generating finances by devising commercially profitable procedures such as mass admission without ensuring requisite facilities, services for imparting sound education. And to safeguard the interest of the student community and parents, a government initiative, Jago Grahak Jago, which means consumer beware, stresses the need to ensure the bona fide of their claims and also to ensure the recognition of these institutions from our regulatory bodies. Now, survival in the new global education market calls for improved productivities and increased competitiveness. Since the education sector has become worldwide and not area specific, there is greater competition among educational institutions. While genuine competition needs to be encouraged so that higher education institutions upgrade their courses, services and technology for the benefit of learners, at the same time, they also need to provide greater choices in terms of free structure, facilities and quality teaching. In this regard, again, the role of regulatory bodies become very crucial. Globalization is also equated with westernization. It is believed that the Western thoughts and culture through their educational services may impact upon the local culture. Some scholars argue that education in a globalized world is under the influence of international institutions such as the World Trade Organization and Organization of Economic and Cooperation and Development. These institutions try to influence the education system of the world, ignoring their educational history, social reality, culture and economy. All this may lead to cultural imperialism, making the future generation rather ignorant of their rich cultural heritage. Even if there is no cultural hegemony of the West, There could be homogenization of culture leading to the loss of local culture and linguistic diversity. Therefore, while designing the course curriculum, it becomes impinging upon the educators to keep the local needs in mind at the same time the global demands. Now, this brings us to the impact on curricula. As there is also an apprehension that globalization of education will impact upon the curricula in higher education, and following the American and British models, there will be greater thrust on vocational courses and skill development at the expense of liberal arts and social sciences. While there is no denying the fact that practical knowledge and skills do add great importance for employability, but too much emphasis on the utilitarian aspect of learning can dilute the mission of higher education. Recently introduced National Institute Ranking Framework and grade system for universities are steps in the right direction because they encourage educational institutions to compete for higher rankings by offering need-based courses and quality education. The higher ranking of some educational institution engaged in teaching liberal arts and social sciences lately reveal that these disciplines continue to be extremely relevant in the present context as they teach students how to make sense of society and their own environment as well as their own being. Technology is also a great important factor in globalization because the process of globalization has been catalyzed by the rapid advancement of technology which have overcome the barriers of time and space. ICT is a key enabler and a vital component of the knowledge-based economy and information revolution. The development of global telecommunication infrastructure, internet, satellites, fiber optic cables and mobile technologies have led to tremendous increase in information flow among various locations. Technology is a great leveler as well as a disruptor in the globalized world. Leveler as it has made the world a global village in the words of Marshall McLuhan, and disruptor as it has increased the digital divide among people. Technological changes also require the application of standard protocols being applied globally such as intellectual property right, copyright laws, patents and world trade agreements which India as a signatory of these agreements also needs to adhere to. So that places a certain challenge on the part of the country. Now, I move to the third part of my presentation on the new education policy recently announced by the government, because this policy proposed by the government has kept some of these challenges in view to transform the higher education ecosystem. This policy is the third major revamp of the framework of education in India since independence. The last policy was put in place in 1986 and it will replace the current policy that has been placed for more than 30 years. Let me quote from the policy. This policy envisions a complete overhaul and re-energizing of the higher education system to overcome these challenges and thereby deliver high quality higher education with equity and inclusion. The policy envisages that by 2035, the gross enrollment ratio or GER as it is called of higher education system in India will increase to 50%. It will be made possible by larger student strength supported by the private sector, open and distance learning system and the use of technology and online modes. The NEP has proposed sweeping changes including extension of the right to education RTE to the children up to the age of 18. As of now, it is only up to the age of 14. Dismantling of University Grants Commission and the AICTE. Introduction of a 4-year multidisciplinary undergraduate programs with multiple exit options and opening of Indian higher education to foreign universities. These are some of the major reforms that the NEP has proposed. Now, let us look at the single regulatory body. It is argued that our present system is over-regulated and it has complex norms, and the policy proposes a simplified structure in the form of a single overarching regulatory body which will replace the UGC and the AICTE. This regulator will be called the Higher Education Commission of India, HECI, and it will have 4 independent verticals to carry out the functions of regulation, funding, accreditation, and setting standards for learning outcome. And each of these verticals will be especially focusing on these very important areas for the improvement of higher education system in the country. Present categorization of streams and discipline as humanities, commerce, and sciences and so on is considered rather narrow and rigid by some scholars. And NEP envisages breaking these boundaries and transforming institutions into large multidisciplinary universities and colleges to create well-rounded and innovative individuals. It proposes that all universities and colleges must aim to become multidisciplinary by 2040. And by 2030, at least one large multidisciplinary HEI should be set up, or in every district or near every district, in which the students of arts and humanities will learn more sciences. At the same time, engineering students will learn more of arts and humanity courses. And all higher education institutions will make an effort to incorporate more vocational subject and soft skills. So this is how the NEP envisages. And one major proposal of the NEP is to allow the entry of foreign education providers. In this regard, select universities, especially those from among top 10 in the world, will be encouraged to set up campuses in India. This reform will enable Indian students to compete globally while remaining connected to their Indian roots. This is how the NEP envisages. It is possible that their entry may increase the cost of education through high fee structures, and other institutions may also start charging high fee, and this can place higher education system out of the reach of a certain section of population. So proper checks and balances will be imperative. The NEP envisages India as a global study destination, an education hub, by providing premium education at affordable cost. Research, teaching collaboration, and faculty-student exchanges will be facilitated with foreign institutions, and credits acquired in foreign universities will also be permitted for the award of degrees in India. At each higher education institution, international student office will be set up for foreign students to coordinate all matters relating to them. At the same time, high-performing Indian universities will be permitted to set up campuses in other countries by signing mutually beneficial MOUs. So it will be a two-way process in which foreign institutions can come to India and Indian institution can set up campuses abroad. And with this, I come to the last slide of my presentation, and let me conclude by saying that various efforts are being made to re-energize the education system in India. Globalization has introduced some challenges as well as opportunities which are likely to get more pronounced in the coming years. The National Education Policy 2020 places great stress on providing universal access to quality education, research and innovation to take India forward in a competitive world. Since higher education in India is a mission aimed at public good, the emerging model will have to balance the local aspirations with global demands. In an increasingly globalized world, there is a strong need to check the existing disparities and optimize growth with social justice. And with this, I come to a close of this presentation. I hope it would have added to your knowledge, you would have found it useful. At this point, suffice to say that globalization has come here to stay, and there is a strong need to balance and to make it relevant for every section of society for the benefit of our population. Thank you very much. Thank you.